When the second wave of the COVID pandemic was at its peak, when hospitals and ICU beds in India were swamped, there was one hospital where 30 oxygenated beds remained virtually unused. COVID patients directed to that hospital by government health workers reached the doors of the building and then turned away. Now, why, you might ask, would patients who desperately needed treatment, and while beds and oxygen were available, why would they turn away? Well, the answer lies in the name of the hospital. McGaddy Road Hospital, otherwise known as McGaddy Leprosy Hospital. You may be surprised that leprosy still exists. In fact, you might have thought that it was eradicated decades ago. But such is the fear and stigma associated with leprosy that COVID patients would rather forgo treatment than bring shame upon their families by entering such a hospital. This hour, and every hour of every day, 30 men, women, and children will receive that diagnosis: you have leprosy. Leprosy is far from eradicated, but it can be. Today, I'd like to tell you how that can happen. But I'd also like to invite you to be part of a small group of men and women who can bring healing to millions and finally set the eradication of leprosy in motion. Leprosy is not a medieval myth. It lurks in the most impoverished communities in the poorest regions of the world. It attacks the nervous system in the coolest parts of the body: the hands, the feet, the face, the eyes, the ears, the nose. It starts as a discoloration on the skin, but beneath the skin, the nervous system is subject to intense attack. And as the nerves are deadened, leprosy patients lose all sense of feeling and pain. Imagine having leprosy in your hands. You've no sense of feeling in the palms of your hands. Danger lurks in ordinary everyday activities. You pick up a boiling pot, you don't feel it, and you destroy your palms. You even leave your fingers prone to accidental amputation while preparing a meal. Scan the internet. Do your own fact check. I know what you'll find. The world rejoiced when leprosy was declared eliminated in 2005. Now, to you and me, in ordinary everyday language, eradication and elimination are exactly the same thing. But in the words and the world of disease control, they are vastly different. And it's that difference that condemns millions of men, women, and children to live lives of needless disability. Leprosy is known for its harsh physical effects, but it affects the whole person physically, mentally, socially, economically, and spiritually. Even patients who have been cured and spared disability often live lives, decades, entire lives of stigma and shame. I want to tell you one lady's story, and I can't tell you her name, but you'll understand why. She was only a young girl when she heard the princess was coming to visit. Anxious to catch a glimpse of royalty, she watched as doctors and photographers filled the room, and then Diana, Princess of Wales, reached out and touched the little girl's hand. But she has never told a soul. She's never told the man she married years later, and she's never told her daughters of the day she came face to face with the kind and beautiful Diana. To tell them, she would have to tell them that she'd been in a leprosy hospital. And even these decades later, that would have unimaginable social consequences. Leprosy has robbed her even of that one precious moment and forced her to live a life of secrecy and fear. Every hour of every day, 30 men, women, and children hear that diagnosis: you have leprosy. In the context, the word eliminated means reduced to such a level that epidemiologists believe that the transmission rate of the disease is so low as not to pose a threat to public health. It means that, well, in the case of leprosy, it means that less than 1 in 10,000 people are diagnosed with the disease. 30 people every hour. That's 250,000 people a year. It's 7 times the population of Tralee, the town in which we stand, and it's twice the entire population of County Kerry. But it's less than 1 in 10,000 of the world's population, so officially, leprosy is eliminated. But to celebrate elimination and not push for eradication, the total removal of the disease, is to say that it's perfectly acceptable that 250,000 people are diagnosed with this disease every year. And I say diagnosed because we have no official statistic for the number of people who actually contract the disease but never appear in the statistics. Because to appear in the statistics, you must receive a diagnosis at a hospital or a healthcare centre. In poor, remote, inaccessible areas, there are hundreds and thousands of people every year who contract the disease but never receive diagnosis nor cure. I heard recently of a teenager in one of those communities, because in those communities people hide or are hidden away by relatives, fearful of being driven from community, and this teenager lived in a cave, sent there by her family, doing their best to protect her. And only her mother came and left a bowl of food outside that cave on a daily basis. And every day, that teenager fought with the dogs in the street to decide who would eat that day. How do I know there are hundreds and thousands of people who contract leprosy but don't appear in the statistics every year? Well, it's easy. Every year, the World Health Organization gathers together statistics from every country that reports on new cases of leprosy. They gather it together and they publish it. So you can go and you can look at the figures. And if you look at the figures and you plot them on a graph, it makes something for interesting examination. In the year 1991, there were 600,000 cases of leprosy. And that graph rose to over 800,000 in the year 1998. And then there was a sharp fall on the other side, all the way down through 2000 and 2005. And elimination was reached in the year 2005, 250,000 people per year, and it's remained rather static. But as they say, the devil is in the detail. And the detail in the graph either side of 2000 is a story in itself. The story of elimination began in 1991 when member states of the WHO promised to eliminate leprosy by the year 2000. And there was great excitement, and there was great activity, and teams went across all of Africa and Asia and Latin America searching for, detecting, curing, and registering all the cases of leprosy. And with all that activity, we saw the graph rise from 600,000 to way over 800,000 in 1998. And then it was 2 years to the deadline, and people said, can it even happen? And of course, even the most optimistic said it couldn't. So a new date of 2005 was set. And then the graph and the figures coincidentally arrive at eradication in 2005. Why? Because the graph after 2000 represents something entirely different. It represents operational change. No longer did people go out and search for people with leprosy, and if you don't search, you don't find, and there's a gap in the numbers. And that gap is huge. Between 2000 and 2005, there was nothing changed in the way people contracted leprosy, so it's purely operational. There are still 500,000 people a year who contract leprosy but never receive diagnosis or cure. Over the past 20 years, that's 10 million people who've contracted leprosy but have never been found and have never been cured. That's twice the population of Ireland. I'm not a medic, and I'm not a scientist. But as the international director of the Mission to End Leprosy, I work with medics and scientists. And it falls to an organization like ours to push for eradication, because the goal was missed. It slipped in the early 2000s, and it falls to us to fight for and deliver it. So here's what we're going to do. The cure for leprosy is 3 drugs mixed together: clofazimine, dapsone, and rifampicin. Clofazimine, incidentally, was discovered in Ireland and since then has been used to treat more than 20 million people, so we know it works. It's the treatment that the WHO used in the 90s. We're going to work with a population of about 1 million people on 3 continents to prove that leprosy can be eradicated, and then we'll have the global rollout. So phase 1 is to prove. Year 1, we're going to go amongst that population. We're going to go door to door like they did in the 90s, and we're going to find every case. We'll see the numbers rise, but we will find every case. Year 2, we'll go back and do exactly the same. Year 3, we'll go back and do the same. And by year 4, we know that the numbers will be reduced to 0. And being Irish, to be sure, we're going to go back and do it again year 5. And when we've proven that it can be held at 0, we have proven that the disease can not only be eliminated in a community, but eradicated. And then we'll go for global rollout. We know it can happen because we know that the approach taken in the 90s was correct. It just wasn't pursued long enough to provide elimination or eradication. Why am I passionate about this? Let me tell you about a young girl I met 20 years ago. I met her in Nepal. She must have been about 12 or 13. She had had leprosy in the soles of her feet, so she lost all sense of feeling. And the local doctor said to her, if you put your feet at the fire at night, it'll restore the soles of your feet. Imagine, no feeling. She put her feet at the fire and she destroyed them. And her dad walked her for 3 days to the hospital to get treatment, promising he would come back to her. And he never came back. And when you ask questions, you discover that dad had 3 other daughters at home and a wife. And he had to make a choice to sacrifice one daughter to save the rest of the family from being driven from the community. No dad should ever have to make that choice. And that's why I'm passionate, because no dad should have to make that choice, because eradication is possible. Right now, we're assembling a team of medics and scientists and community health workers to launch that eradication program. There's room on that team for donors and investors and advocates. And there's room for ordinary people who want to do something extraordinary, who want to see eradication, something historical, to eradicate the oldest known disease in history. And I invite you to be part of that team. Imagine being able to say, I played my part in eradicating the world's oldest known communicable disease. Imagine. Thank you.